Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. And we thank you for joining us. This is our weekend edition where we talk about the issues that were going on the previous week. And I keep thinking we'll be coming to a week where we'll say, well, there really wasn't that much going on, but that's not this week. So joining me in studio, we have Lathan Watts, frequent attendee here on Fridays with the Lathan's with the First Liberty Institute. Lathan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me back.
And joining us on the microphones here in studio, Genevieve Collins.
Good afternoon. Glad to be here.
She is the Texas director of the Americans for Prosperity. And just tell us a little bit about Americans for Prosperity, because it's been around for a long time. Peggy Venable used to have your job for a number of years. She and I were old friends, used to do a lot of things together, and I think she must have stepped down and retired, and they put in you in her place.
I know, impossible shoes to fill.
Big shoes.
Yes.
I hate to say that about a lady, but big shoes to fill.
So Americans for Prosperity is the largest grassroots organization in the country. There are 35 states that have Americans for Prosperity chapters. And I like to say that we blend the grassroots army with policy advocacy. So we actually make policy that people want in their communities come to fruition at the state and federal level.
Make policies that people want in their communities, unlike much of what's going on in Washington.
You mean like literally everything? I mean, I like to say that Texas creates opportunities and achieves results, while D.C. creates one-size-fits-all solutions and hopes for improvement.
Yes, it does. Well, thank you both for joining us, and we'll start out today talking a little bit about the jobs numbers, because those came out today, and those were good, better than expected. 531,000 new added to the payroll. These are non-farm jobs. Unemployment rate dropped to 4.6% unemployment, and the workforce dropped. The labor force participation rate clicked up just a little bit, but the number of unemployed out there just dropped significantly, and that's good news for us, especially since is Congress debating some kind of major bill right now, Lathan? It seems like something's going on, and I saw Nancy on the television the other day. What are we talking about here?
I may have heard something about that. Yeah, a couple of spending bills. One they're calling a social safety net bill, and then the Build Back Better infrastructure bill, which, depending on who you ask, the grand total of spending is anywhere from $2 to $4 trillion. And most people, according to polls, don't think it's going to benefit them at all. So it's baffling to me why we're spending this much time in the Democrat Party trying to whip up votes to get this done. You know, it's interesting because, as you point out, they're saying it's a $1.75 trillion. They are not waiting for the Congressional Budget Office scoring of this. At least there are moderates who are saying we don't want to vote on this until we get that. They released a White House score of the thing that said, oh, no, this is completely paid for in our new taxes and so forth. Nobody believes that. This is the same person who said we're going to have all our people out of Afghanistan. Right. So nobody believes that, but it's interesting that they're pushing to try to get it done today because they're going on vacation. And it seems like with the vote that they had in Virginia, New Jersey on Tuesday, the public is pushing back, and I think Nancy seems to want to try to get something done before that. But Genevieve, y'all have been looking at this at Americans for Prosperity, and you don't see the public demanding these things quite like Democrats are saying.
Absolutely not. Most Americans, and like I said, we have 35 chapters around the country. We are hearing overwhelmingly that people believe, over 50% of the people we poll believe this is going to hurt them, raise inflation, and they don't believe that after coming out of a global pandemic, that the Democrats need to spend $5 trillion plus. If we look at the COVID spending package, the one spending package that Biden was able to pass, that was $1.9 trillion. Now you're going to add another 1.2 for the bipartisan infrastructure bill, plus at least $1.75 trillion for this social spending spree. That's almost $6 trillion worth of new spending coming out of a global pandemic. And Americans just don't see that they need that right now.
And that's why these numbers coming out from the jobs are so important, because when the Delta variant took off, we had a bit of a drop in the economy as it spiked there, and you would expect some changes there. And it was in August and September. We didn't see things quite as well, but now we're getting through October, and the numbers that we're looking at here are October numbers, and it looks like employers are hiring. And one of the things that I saw from the jobs being hired, you've got a lot of people in social services coming in, the service sector coming in.
Right.
The real bright spot of that, not only were so many jobs coming in, but the government employees actually declined by, I think, 73,000 or something like that.
Which is wonderful.
Amen.
We're moving in the right direction. So why, Lathan, do we have the pressure to try to get this done?
I think they're desperate to change the news cycle from anything that will distract from the absolute bloodbath that they just suffered in Virginia and New Jersey. The fact that New Jersey is probably going to go to a recount in that governor's race, I mean,
almost certainly as close as it was,
10,000 votes, I think, was the difference in an election where there were over 3 million cast. You know, in New Jersey, you had a truck driver who spent $150 just to get on the ballot, beat the Senate president.
The most powerful man in New Jersey.
And so you take that plus the absolute landslide in Virginia, where they took all 3 of the statewide races and took back the House, unseated a sitting attorney general for the first time since 1885. I think the pressure to pass this bill is to have literally anything else to talk about other than the beating they just took this week.
Genevieve, the narrative coming out of the progressives is the reason we didn't do as well as we should have is because we haven't passed all these things. So now we need to pass them in order to be able to do better. And I think that's just contrary to what the public is saying.
It's literally contrary to every voter that voted in Ohio, New Jersey, Virginia. They were given an absolute, I mean, it was a bloodbath. But the reality is the Democrat Party has been incredibly ineffective, and they have to be able to demonstrate. And they think that if they can ram this thing through now, they can demonstrate some great success that the Biden administration will have, despite the fact that the large majority of this country does not want a social safety net. They just want to be able to live their lives without huge government oversight.
My guess is there's a fair amount of support for the infrastructure bill, at least as it stands. Maybe if it was scaled down, you'd get a little bit more support. But of course, they can't. They haven't been able to vote on that because the progressives have held that hostage. Yeah. We aren't voting on that until you make sure that our progressive legislation passes.
Well, now we're seeing from the Republicans that we're really kind of thinking about getting on to either the infrastructure bill or voting for this bipartisan or this social spending spree. They're all retracting their potential votes. And all the centrist Democrats, they're trying to walk the plank. They're saying, wait, we want to hold. We want to see what we have to deal with and how bad this is going to be for my next reelection.
It's a very good point, because the strongest supporters of the bill tend to be the progressives who are in relatively safe seats, at least have been until redistricting comes through. That may make some changes. So we're talking with Lathan Watts of the First Liberty Institute and Genevieve Collins of Americans for Prosperity, covering the events that happened this week. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a minute.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Victor Davis Hanson reminds us that many of our hallowed institutions are failing us. That unfortunately includes the top echelon of the military, the leadership and the intelligence agencies, the medical establishment, and of course the universities. He refers to them as the ground zero of woke. He explains that America's reputation of global academic superiority usually rested on the science, mathematics, physics, technology, medicine, and engineering, but he laments that woke ideas have even infected the STEM disciplines. He also explains that universities are insulated from many market realities. Never in U.S. history have elite universities piled up such huge endowments which soared during the lockdown. Harvard has $40 billion, Yale $30 billion, Stanford $28 billion, Princeton, $25 billion. On the other hand, students are graduating with massive student loan obligations. When he was on my radio program, we discussed the impact student loan debt has had on the country. These students are likely to marry later, have children later, and more easily slide into prolonged adolescence. The greatest concern is the fact that so many toxic ideas originate from these woke institutions and spread into society. Americans have been urged by university law schools and political science departments to eliminate the 233-year-old Electoral College, to pack the Supreme Court after 150 years of a 9-justice bench, to end the 180-year filibuster, and to question the constitutional cornerstone of 2 senators per state. Parents and students need to reconsider what kind of education is being provided by these universities. It costs so much and produces so little of real value. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Critical Race Theory, go to viewpoints.info/CRT.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and with me in studio, Lathan Watts of the First Liberty Institute and Genevieve Collins of Americans for Prosperity. And we're discussing these issues that happened this week. And Thursday, we've got the administration dropping its OSHA mandate, which is essentially what the president has done is said he wants to have all federal employees vaccinated. I think he probably has the authority to be able to do that because they're working. But generally, we've given employers wide latitude to be able to impose various things like that. Whether they should or not is another issue, but we've generally given them that kind of freedom. But then he also wanted every company that was a contractor of the U.S. government to have their people all vaccinated. Not sure he has that authority. And then he also wants all employers with 100 employees or more to mandate their employees be vaccinated. These, of course, private sector employees. And I feel really sure he doesn't have the authority to do that, but that never stopped him yet. So, Lathan, y'all, First Liberty got involved in this immediately.
Yeah, and he's also mandated via the DOD that all military
that's correct.
get it. So today we filed on behalf of 3 clients, Daystar Television Network, which is a Christian broadcast network, the American Family Association, and Answers in Genesis, which is another Christian ministry. A challenge to the OSHA rule. It was officially published in the Federal Register today, so today is the first day that you can challenge it, and so we filed suit today.
And they all have standing because they have 100 or more employees.
Yes, exactly. And when you're challenging a rule like this, you actually go directly to the Court of Appeals. So this has been filed in the Fifth Circuit and the Sixth Circuit. There are others who are challenging it Also, I believe in the 11th Circuit. I know the Attorney General of Texas is challenging it on behalf of Texas, and several other Republican attorneys general will be filing in other circuits as well. But we filed in the 5th and the 6th on behalf of those clients based on where they're located. And so now we'll wait to see, because we weren't the only ones to challenge this. So there's a bit of almost like a lottery system as to which case gets picked first by the circuit courts of appeal. And, I think they'll move fairly quickly on this to hear this. Then we also have a challenge to the DOD mandate on behalf of 30 plus Navy SEALs who all have religious convictions related to this particular vaccine and who are being told that they're not going to get any sort of exemption, that they may be discharged from the Navy for doing it, potentially court-martialed for not taking it.
And of course, these are SEALs, so it's not like these are fraidy cats who are scared of things.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. If there's anybody who's probably physically fit enough to withstand COVID, it's probably a Navy SEAL, and just it just sort of demonstrates like what this president, as commander in chief, what his priorities are. I mean, this is a threat to national security. If you're going to gut the most elite fighting force of our fighting force. And not only that, they're not just facing potential court-martial. They've also been told if they're court-martialed that the DOD might sue them individually to recoup the money the DOD spent training them to be a SEAL.
Oh, my gosh.
Which is hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars per SEAL. So not only is your career over, but we'll probably just bankrupt you also while we're at it. So we're very, very busy on this issue. As I said, there's lots of challenges to the OSHA rule, and then there's other challenges in addition to ours on the DOD rule. I think the OSHA thing will probably move fairly quickly at the.
So is there an expedited process for this, or do they make the decision if they want to move quickly?
I think it's not necessarily an expedited process, except for the fact that you do get to file directly at the Court of Appeals. Normally you would go to a federal district court, win or lose there, and then appeal to the Court of Appeals. With this, you actually file at the very beginning with the Court of Appeals. So once they hear one of these and decide one way or the other, we like our chances in the Fifth Circuit and the Sixth Circuit. They have historically been good on religious liberty issues. The Congress did not ever delegate authority over anything related to this virus to OSHA. It was given to HHS, and I think even HHS would have had a hard time passing the smell test, saying we have the authority to mandate that employers mandate to their employees in the private sector without any sort of accommodations for religious belief, because if they thought they could get away with it, they would have done it with HHS. So the fact that they're doing it via OSHA, which Congress never authorized to deal with coronavirus, we like our chances. Now, the administration, if we win in the 5th and 6th, will likely appeal to the Supreme Court, and then we'll see what the Supreme Court does. There will probably be people filing in other circuits as well that may or may not rule in favor of our side. And if it creates a circuit split, there's no guarantee the Supreme Court takes a case, but when there's a split in the circuits, that's about as close to a guarantee as you can get. Because you can't have, the First Amendment mean one thing in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and something completely different out in California, Washington, Oregon, wherever the other circuit is.
Now, are all these cases that you're filing, are they asking for relief based upon religious beliefs? Because I could see a Navy SEAL saying, I just don't want to get vaccinated. It's not a religious exemption because I'm not claiming that.
Right. So our clients all have religious convictions about this vaccine, because that's the only type of work that we do is related to religious liberty. So there, I'm sure, are other objections that people have, but we're only taking cases that are related to religious liberty. So all of these Navy SEALs have deeply held religious convictions related to this vaccine, whether it's about the aborted the fetal stem cells that were used in the development of it, or just based on a more general theology of the body, that the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and I should be careful about what I put into my body. Whatever those beliefs are, they're sincerely held, and they should be accommodated. And frankly, a lot of them are getting what looks to be a form letter from the DOD. And each individual request for an exemption is supposed to be evaluated on the merits of that specific request. And the fact that they're all getting the same letter that's worded identically says that they're not doing that. They're just blanket denying everything. So, there's a lot of sort of plates spinning right now on this, and we're going to have to wait and see, how some of these cases come out. But, people should definitely pray for these clients and, pray that we get a good hearing and a good decision, because this is government overreach at its absolute worst.
Genevieve, when Barack Obama included the health insurance mandate in Obamacare, there was a pushback on that. The government doesn't have the authority to do that. Right. Chief Justice John Roberts wavered on that and said, well, I think it's a tax. And so he went with the four liberals, and it passed. But it keeps coming back to this notion of seeing Democrats who are taking major steps that we don't think they have the constitutional authority to do, and yet if we don't push back on this, they will take more steps.
So I think the Obama administration actually offers a great example to what the Biden administration is doing. So the Obama administration passed DACA, the Deferred Action for Children Act, something like that, which is not constitutional at all. But they realized that they could pass this act and get it put into the system before the law could actually catch up. So I think we've seen Biden do this with eviction notices during COVID.
Yes, we did.
We're seeing this exact same thing play out. It's the old Obama playbook that if you just push it through and ram it through, the courts can't keep up at the rate in which the expectation suddenly becomes the reality.
And the mandate, as I understand it, doesn't go into effect until January of this coming year. So that gives them a couple of months. Right. And if the arguably, if the Delta virus has receded even more by then, and other things, they could, if they lose, they could say, well, we were trying and we wanted to give employers coverage, because there are some employers who say we'd like to have the cover to be able to tell our employees to do this. Yeah,
and but it's kind of the camel's nose under the tent. Be careful what you wish for. Okay, yeah, we'll give you cover if you want to do this. And in fact, if you don't do it, we're going to fine you $14,000 per employee who is not vaccinated.
And where does that money come from? I'm just curious.
Yeah. It'll come out right out of their customer's pocket, because they'll jack up the price for whatever business they're in. And this also hurts the labor market. We were talking about the jobs numbers.
Yes.
Even the labor unions have come out and said, this is not good, because you've already got a worker shortage right now, and you're basically telling even people who are employed, you're not going to be employed if you don't get the shot, and plenty of them are willing not to, and you're about to see unemployment potentially go back up again.
Well, when we come back from the break, I'd like to ask the question, is Biden doing this just to make it look like he's doing something that maybe you could argue could be right, because he's done so many things wrong? So my guests, Lathan Watts and Genevieve Collins, stay with Point of View. We'll be back in just a minute.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. Pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. And we're doing our weekend edition where we go over some of the things that happened this past week. And it was a filled week, of fun-filled week in some ways, and less so a foul-filled week in other ways.
Depends on your definition of fun.
Well, like it could also be a foul-filled week.
Yeah.
Joining me in Watts in Watts in the studio, Lathan Watts with First Liberty Institute and Genevieve Collins with Americans for Prosperity. And we were talking. We left in the last segment talking about the mandate to have a vaccine. So the Biden administration has released their findings yesterday, or their report on the mandate. It had been sitting over at the Occupational Safety and Health Administration or agency administration for a few months, and they finally released those regulations and what they're requiring. They're requiring employers with 100 or more employees to require their employees to be vaccinated. Though there may be a caveat there, Lathan. There may be an out for some.
Yeah, the regulation, you either have to certify that they've all been vaccinated, or the ones who aren't must be tested every week, which is no small thing and would likely not be a small expense for the company also. So it's definitely an incentive to get those companies to require their employees to get vaccinated. Vaccines a one time and then maybe a booster versus testing every week and paying for, testing and results every week for what could be a large portion of your workforce.
Now, my own thinking is that one of the reasons Biden is pushing this is because he feels like he was elected on a few things. One, he said President Trump was mishandling the whole coronavirus pandemic. He was doing a terrible job. Millions of Americans were dying. And if you put me, Joe Biden, into the presidency, I will handle this. And he came in having the vaccines had already been invented, and they had been going for a month, and they were up over 1 million vaccinations a day when Biden took the oath of office. But we saw the numbers begin to decline a little bit. It looked like we were on the right path. Not so much from Joe Biden, but from just the fact that Donald Trump had gotten the process started. But then in the summer, we started seeing the Delta variant sort of increasing. And Genevieve, the numbers were getting up there, and that was happening at the same time as the Afghanistan withdrawal and a number of other things. And it always struck me that one of the reasons he's doing this is he feels like politically, not for the health of the country, but politically, he needs to get control of this issue so that he can say, we reduced the cases while I was president. And so it seemed like to me the mandate that he's doing, because he didn't do it earlier, is in large part a way of saying, look, I am in charge and I am trying to address this problem.
Well, I think you're exactly right, Dr. Matthews. Everything that this administration is doing is geared towards a political lens, not a practical lens. And I think that it's important to remind the audience that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, while running for office, said that they wouldn't take the vaccine because they don't know what's in it.
That's right.
And now they're expecting us on blind faith to just be sheep that follow them. I mean, this is hypocrisy at the most maximum scale. And so, everything that can go wrong with this administration has. And it's just one bad thing, bad policy after another, where they can't get out of their way, as we see with the infrastructure bill or the social spending package, or they just have bad ideas, right? And so they're not principled, they're not virtuous, and they're not valuable.
I've made the same point that you did, that many of the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and others said, this is the Trump vaccine. I'm not going to take this thing. I'm skeptical unless the CDC comes out and says it's okay. On November 3rd, that changed.
Shocker.
And now...
What a shock.
And now they're all for not what they called the Trump vaccine, which was always invented by Pfizer and Moderna, but now they're all for it, and they're trying to get people vaccinated because their agenda is on the line here. And it's interesting, though, that they're willing to take these steps Donald Trump did not take this step. They're willing to take these steps of mandating vaccinations among various groups. And if you can do it among employers with 100 employees or with 100, why can't you do it with employers with 50 or 25 or 10? So I think that may be where we go if we find out that if the Supreme Court ultimately rules that this is okay. Now, can the circuit courts put a hold on this, Lathan, and sort of stop the process of it? Or
they could, yeah. I mean, you could ask for, and depending on which part of this you're talking about, because there are other lawsuits that have asked for a stay of some of these orders while these cases are pending. So a federal judge could stay the order and say basically it doesn't go into effect while this case is pending, and you typically do that at a federal district court level, but then depending on which circuit court of appeal you go to, the administration would likely ask that circuit court of appeals to invalidate the stay or the injunction by the district court, and then the policy goes forward while the litigation proceeds. So I've been asked a lot of questions about this and a lot of public speaking lately, and it's not a very popular answer, but we're just going to have to wait and see, honestly, because just like Genevieve said before, how they seem to be kind of making things up as they go along, and the law is sort of trying to do the same thing and playing catch up. The law on this issue is kind of being made as we speak, and so we're kind of out on the frontier here. And I keep reminding people, you got to remember the actual frontier. A lot of pioneers got scalped, okay, and there's going to be some people get scalped on this issue too, because we're in the process of hopefully via case law deciding what they can and can't do.
Now, to be clear, you're tackling these on a First Amendment ground, religious
Correct.
liberty, right?
Yes,
Because that's all you deal with,
right?
But one could make the case that this is a 10th Amendment issue, that the
Certainly.
Constitution does not provide any provision for the federal government to do this. So, do you think? I assume there will be somebody else who will try to file that.
Probably so. And in fact, there was I think it was a congressman, and I'm blanking on his name, yesterday when OSHA announced that they were publishing this rule, he filed a bill to abolish OSHA. and
Something that gets my vote.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, because
can we take more of them away?
Yeah, while you're at it, I've got a list. If you want to start getting rid of executive branch agencies, because none of them are in the enumerated powers of the executive branch in the Constitution. They've been authorized by Congress over years and years, many of it coming out of the New Deal and other things, the Great Society and everything else. But the legislative branch, really should, regardless of party, really should be taking measures to claw back the lawmaking authority from the executive branch, because that's exactly what the executive branch is doing via these agencies. They're making law.
Right.
The people who are making these laws are not elected. There's no accountability to
Congress
the voters.
has increasingly sort of shuffled off the power to the agencies or the president so that they don't have to take the blame when something goes wrong.
Exactly.
Right.
But let's ask the question, because states do have the authority to be able to require mandates. We've been able to do that, and the Supreme Court has ruled on that. So if you ended up but we haven't ever done that on adults, I don't believe. So if we find out that the federal mandate is not appropriate,
right,
can states, do you think, turn around and say, all right, we're going to now, as California, we're going to mandate this?
I think they have a better shot, pardon the pun,
I love it.
I enjoyed that.
winning, of winning on that issue as a state government versus a federal government, because federalism still applies. If you want to live in a state that mandates it, well, move to California. Texas isn't going to. If you don't like that, move to Texas.
Nobody's doing that these days. If you haven't noticed,
Right.
They're moving to Texas.
Exactly.
So anyway, but Genevieve, going back to this issue of overstating your authority, and my biggest concern here is we're setting precedents where, especially Democrats, could be Republicans as well, when they see these sort of precedents step in, they'll take the authority and they'll begin to do things that they simply don't have the 10th Amendment authority to be able to do.
I'm not convinced that the Democrats care about the Constitution anymore. That's me personally. I think that it's a piece of paper to many progressives.
If it's a living constitution, it can mean just about anything you
Whatever
want.
you want it to.
Exactly. And I think that Americans are waking up to the wokeness that we're all kind of living through and questioning now. And they're seeing, wait, why do I have to make a difference between the American founding versus American history? Or I don't want the government to have the IRS in my bank accounts if I make more than $28 a day. They're starting to wake up to the fact that this is massive government overreach, and it's time for the government to stop.
Well, we're talking with Lathan Watts of the First Liberty Institute and Genevieve Collins of Americans for Prosperity. We're going to take a break now. We'll come back in just a minute, but we'll begin, because you've opened the door to the wokeness, we'll begin to talk about the elections this week. Stay with us. We'll be back on Point of View in just a minute.
Do you ever search online for a minor ailment, only to find so much information you begin to worry you've got a serious disease? The best thing to do in those cases is to check in with a real MD. The same wisdom applies to teens searching websites on gender identity. Crystal Cole, medical director of the Center for Gender Affirming Medicine at Akron, Ohio's Children's Hospital, told the Wall Street Journal gender-diverse people have always existed, but they didn't necessarily have a community or a way to find that community. She continued, "What we're seeing now is young people comfortable in exploring their gender identity and finding communities of people who will accept them and not judge them. That's one of the wonderful things about social media." It's not wonderful. The journal's family and tech writer, Julie Jargon, says the academic and medical communities are debating the role that social media has played in the apparent increase in teenage discussion and exploration of sexual identity. Abigail Schreier, author of Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, warns parents of the dangers of this online encouragement. She speaks of an endless supply of mentors who cheerfully document their own physical transitions, omitting mention of dangerous side effects, and offering tips on how to pass as a man and how to break away from unsupportive parents. In her article, How Gender Forums Online Can Pose Risks, Ms. Jargon tells the story of 17-year-old Noah, who prefers fashion and art to sports. He accessed a site called Discord. In a chat room for artists, members suggested he might be pansexual or gender fluid and gave him lots of positive encouragement when he began identifying that way. Childhood friends were puzzled at this development, and his parents encouraged him to take a break from Discord and found him a registered family therapist. Noah rejected those disordered identities. Without alert friends and parents, he may have taken a different path. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View as we discuss the things that happened this week. And the real earthquake that happened this week was the election on Tuesday, both in Virginia and New Jersey. Few other things around, but those were the two that really got the most attention. And Genevieve, Americans for Prosperity were active in that Virginia race. What were y'all doing there?
So as I mentioned, we have 35 state chapters around the country. We deployed every single chapter into the state of Virginia, and we're like an all hands on team
deck.
SWAT.
Yeah.
You know, we really looked at the target areas of Loudoun County, Virginia Beach, as well as Richmond, as really the target areas where we need to flip votes and make sure that we're talking to folks. So we had over 900,000 phone calls and knocked on over 150,000 doors in 2 weeks. And I tell you,
Is that in Loudoun County or the state?
that's across those 3 counties.
Oh, okay.
So not exactly even split of 50,000 each, but Loudoun and then Richmond got the most, and then Virginia Beach.
And what were you hearing from the people that you were contacting at the doors?
At the doors, it was inflation. I can't.
Really?
Yes. Gas prices, the cost of food is going up, and they're realizing what we all know to be true, and they're seeing that Biden's economic policies are trickling down to an adverse effect on their home. And then you're also seeing the reaction, especially in Loudoun County, to what's going on in the education system. With critical race theory, with Terry McAuliffe actually saying parents in September having that huge gap. Parents don't have a right to participate in their children's education.
Let me remind our listeners that in Washington, a gaffe is when somebody accidentally tells the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
Well said. But it really demonstrates, we kept hearing from the doors that we're tired of D.C. policies trying to infiltrate Virginia. And that's being played out in inflation and education specifically. And we are so excited. I mean, our Texas team, we made over 50,000 phone calls just in the span of 7 days trying to go help our friendly neighbors. This is a huge win for the country in really stopping the federal government overreach and the Build Back Biden agenda. I refuse to call it better because I think it's worse. But the other thing I would say is that suburban women voters came back. They tried to keep talking about Trump. The Democrats paraded around everyone from Hillary Clinton to Barack Obama and everyone in between for Terry McAuliffe. And they just kept they tried to race against Donald Trump instead of Glenn Youngkin.
And the Lincoln Project, which was people who were formerly GOP, as I understand it, were sent some people to make it look like they were racist or Nazi sympathizers or something to one of the Youngkin rallies and made it look like they were there supporting him. And they found out, well, no, in fact, these were plants that were had nothing to do with Youngkin.
And my favorite part about the Lincoln Project is that if you look at the panel, they're saying like, oh, it's a bunch of old white men supremacists. Well, like this whole group had to go through diversity, equity, and inclusion, because they have a woman, a person of color, a bunch of white guys that are against Youngkin, but trying to put him as a white supremacist. I mean, it's ridiculous. And it was really ineffective and blew up in their face.
And Lathan, when you look at the people who were elected in Virginia, it's hard to make the case that this is a white supremacist ticket that they had.
Yeah, it is. And it was, like Genevieve said, I mean, the Dems tried to nationalize the election. They brought in all the big heavy hitters from the national scene.
May have been the worst thing they did.
Exactly. They tried to, paint Youngkin as a Trump guy. Youngkin, I think, wisely stayed away from that, focused on issues that were important to Virginians, did not make it about himself, not about him, not about his biography or his personality. It was about the issues that were important to people of Virginia. And then it always helps when your opponent messes up and tells the truth. And I really think that race was over when Terry McAuliffe said on TV that parents have no business telling teachers, what to do in the classroom. Even Bill Maher on HBO said, you better be careful because parents vote.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly what happened. The people that even they count on for votes, like suburban moms, like union members, like, ethnic minorities, regardless of party label, you tell me that I don't have a say in what my child is learning in school, I will vote for the other guy just to show you that, yes, I do have a say.
Yeah.
And so you saw it in the turnout, in that the D turnout was not what it was, or what they needed it to be. And that is either they were so aggravated by McAuliffe and what was going on in Loudoun County in the schools and inflation and elsewhere that either they stayed home or they actually crossed over and sent sort of a protest vote and voted for Youngkin. And every midterm election is a referendum on the president.
Yes.
Every time.
Yeah.
No matter what the president says, he is on the ballot. It's the first chance that voters have to react to what's been going on. And Virginia sent a very, very loud and clear message about what's been going on in the first year and a half to almost 2 years. And New Jersey as well. I mean, the fact that governor's race is now, a 10,000, I think it was like a 10,000 vote difference and will likely go to a recount. We don't know if the Republican will end up winning or not. But the fact that a guy who drives a truck for a living paid $150 to get on the ballot and didn't do much of anything else and beat the Democrat president of the state Senate in New Jersey
is amazing.
Tells you just what a potential wave election, the midterms, could turn out to be.
Here's a statistic that came from the Wall Street Journal as they were looking at the vote in Virginia, and this has got to worry Democrats more than anything. Even though the black vote was 88% for McAuliffe and 12% for Youngkin, that's actually a little better than most Republicans have done.
Yeah.
But the Hispanic, or what they call the Hispanic or Latina vote, 43% for McAuliffe, 55%
I was just getting
for
ready
the
to talk about
Republican.
that.
Right.
So one of our sister brands is called the Libre Initiative, and it's all about Hispanic engagement and identifying Hispanics and getting them to come out and vote. And we deployed, so there's 11 states that have our Libre brand. Texas has one of them. We deployed everybody to go into Hispanic neighborhoods in Virginia and knock doors. And I tell you what, it was huge, the momentum that they had, because they just had their doors knocked. It's all about those voter contacts, those unique voter contacts, talking about the number one issue for Hispanic families. It's education. So, Glenn Youngkin is talking about that he's listening to the community and then thus talking about education as a top priority. And that is the one thing Hispanics care the most about. They want their children to have a fabulous education. And now you finally have a candidate talking directly to them with messengers that match who they're talking to. And that's the power of having the right messenger in the Hispanic community.
And with McAuliffe saying we're not going to let you have that influence because we're going to take care of the education aspect.
And I think that there was a lot of dog whistling on the McAuliffe campaign. I think people are kind of tired of all the racistness. And I would just say that the last thing for me that was most inspiring is that it shows that conservatives can go back to talking about the issues. That when we talk about the issues, we're right.
Yeah.
That our principles mirror what people really want. And it's a great opportunity to move away from that kind of egocentric or
personality
driven politics to really engaging people, expanding the tent on issues.
Well, we'll come back after the break, and we've got a number of the articles up on our website, pointofview.net, that you'll be able to go and find some of these articles, the Wall Street Journal and National Review pieces and others looking at the election. And when we come back, we'll continue with our discussion about the election with Lathan Watts of First Liberty Institute, Genevieve Collins of Americans for Prosperity. I'm Merrill Matthews. Stay with us. We'll be back after the break.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View radio talk show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @Point of View RTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @Point of View RTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome back to Point of View for our Weekend Edition Friday. I'm Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and we are talking about all the things that have been happening this past week, and there's a bunch of them. Joining me in studio, Lathan Watts with the First Liberty Institute, and Genevieve Collins with Americans for Prosperity. She's the head of the she's the Texas director of Americans for Prosperity, and we ended the last hour talking about the elections. And Genevieve, you had people, Americans for Prosperity had lots of people on the ground in Virginia.
Hundreds, yes.
Trying to figure, and so you got the feedback from them. Can they take this through 2022 to the next election? Are there lessons here that we can learn from what happened in Virginia?
Absolutely. What we're seeing, let me address the future first. Mm-hmm. What we're seeing in Texas is what's played out in Virginia already. We've got people around the state. We've got 11 offices around the state of Texas, and we've got people knocking on doors, just talking to people. We just want to listen to hear what people are angry about, what's on their mind. And I will tell you, inflation is the number one thing that's going on in suburban homes in Dallas, Houston, and the Austin suburbs. And we saw that play out exactly the same in the Virginia suburbs, that people are really focused on how much more money everything is costing. Even the Thanksgiving dinner or future Christmas presents. Even if you can get a turkey, right? So we're seeing that the economy is a huge driver. We came off of a barreling economy, a very bull economy in 2020. Despite a global pandemic. And now we're kind of in this weird lull where our supply chain is broken. And we're seeing that Biden's kind of top-down economic policies just don't work. Mm-hmm. And they affect the people who can't afford the most, right? So we're seeing that this is a great opportunity because, fiscally responsible budget, conservative fiscal policy, these are the things that people like. They may not necessarily, centrists or moderates may not necessarily call it that, but they like the fact that they want to save money, they want to make money, and they want to be able to provide for their families.
And to your point on inflation, if the Biden administration is able to pass its Build Back Better, or I call it Build Back Badder,
exactly,
legislation, we're looking at on the face of it, 1.75 trillion, maybe actually 3 trillion. You pointed out earlier, you had the initial bill that passed, the jobs bill, not the jobs bill, but the pandemic bill in February or March. That was over $1 trillion. They've got the infrastructure bill, which is around $1 trillion. And the concern is that you start flooding that, and the government doesn't have that money sitting in a bank account. It has to create that money or borrow it.
It's our money.
And which eventually means taxes. Yeah. And the concern is that that's going to push inflation even much higher, and we'll be seeing dramatically increase in prices.
Huge increase in prices, especially if the Fed keeps interest rates really low or artificially low, and we sell more bonds to China. We're just selling our future. And that's a really scary prospect for a lot of Americans when we're kind of feeling the squeeze on China anyways. Mm-hmm. And I think that really what people don't want to see egregious government spending. We spent $6 trillion in COVID relief last year alone. We don't need to mirror that the following year. This is really a time where we kind of need to tighten up our belt buckles here. And you're wearing a belt buckle. That's why I said that. Yeah. But tighten up our belts and really make sure that we're protecting our homes and protecting our futures. And protecting our future also means making sure our children have a great education, have a world-class education that mirrors the values that we were all raised with, the fact that America is the greatest country on earth, that our Bill of Rights, our Declaration of Independence, these are not things that we need to be scared of that are inherently racist. These are things that parents want to say, these are things that are inherently good. These are documents that countries around the world have looked to for inspiration and guidance. And this is what we need to be really pushing, and not this American exceptionalism. I'm saying that in air quotes, but it's like that America is exceptional.
Lathan, she mentioned the supply chain issues, and I think I saw today that Governor Abbott in Texas has said, well, if they're having so much trouble getting your tankers unloaded in California, come on around to Texas. We've got plenty of space to get them unloaded. And we may see something like that because so many suppliers are having to move to air freight to try to get things moved. And I hear almost every day in the news or talking on the local news in the evening, if you want to get something for Christmas, you better buy it early because it may not be there otherwise. And that's going to be a real problem for husbands who wait till Christmas Eve.
Yeah, absolutely.
to go buy things.
It's going to cause some domestic tranquility type of issues. But yeah, Abbott did make the point that in the time it will take a tanker who is sitting in line off the coast of California to actually get into the port and get the things unloaded, in the same amount of time they could leave where they are, go via the Panama Canal up to Texas, get it unloaded on the trucks and delivered in the same amount of roughly 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks if they left California right now and get your goods to market. Genevieve mentioned the like the bonds and going into debt, to print all this money. And it's not just that China buys some of these, and they do. Mm-hmm. It's that when the government does that, it crowds out the debt market for private investment. So if there are private sector companies that are trying to get access to loans, when you have the government, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, it crowds out space in the debt market for private investment. Mm-hmm. And private sector employers rely on that to be able sometimes to expand or to diversify, which then leads to being able to hire more people. It's a long-term ripple effect, and then obviously the inflationary pressure that it creates. The fact that we went from being an energy exporter at the end of the last term to now our president says it's up to OPEC and Russia to produce more to bring the gas prices down. You were looking at, like Jimmy Carter's second term on steroids. You have the recipe for stagflation, where prices go up, wages don't, supply line issues and shortages. Mm-hmm. I wasn't quite old enough to remember the lines at the gas pumps, but I was around then. I just wasn't old enough to really remember it. But you were looking at we're staring it right in the face. It is potentially coming right back at us.
Well, I waited in some of those lines. And I still remember in the late 70s during the high inflation time there where a friend of mine bought a house and he was thrilled he got 15% rate on it. 15% interest rate on his house, and he thought he'd walked away with a steal.
Wow.
So if we see those, James Carville said in Clinton's time, it's still the case, it's the economy stupid.
Yes.
Now, James Carville recently said it's the wokeness stupid.
That's true.
To the Democrats. So anyway, we're talking with Lathan Watts of the First Liberty Institute and Genevieve Collins of Americans for Prosperity. When we come back, we're going to take up a couple of the Supreme Court issues that have been that this court heard this time. And if you want to give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. We'll open up the lines. 1-800-351-1212. Point of View. We'll be back in just a minute.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Victor Davis Hanson reminds us that many of our hallowed institutions are failing us. That unfortunately includes the top echelon of the military, the leadership and the intelligence agencies, the medical establishment, and of course the universities. He refers to them as the ground zero of woke. He explains that America's reputation of global academic superiority usually rested on the science, mathematics, physics, technology, medicine, and engineering, but he laments that woke ideas have even infected the STEM disciplines. He also explains that universities are insulated from many market realities. Never in U.S. history have elite universities piled up such huge endowments which soared during the lockdown. Harvard has $40 billion, Yale $30 billion, Stanford $28 billion, Princeton, $25 billion. On the other hand, students are graduating with massive student loan obligations. When he was on my radio program, we discussed the impact student loan debt has had on the country. These students are likely to marry later, have children later, and more easily slide into prolonged adolescence. The greatest concern is the fact that so many toxic ideas originate from these woke institutions and spread into society. Americans have been urged by university law schools and political science departments to eliminate the 233-year-old Electoral College, to pack the Supreme Court after 150 years of a 9-justice bench, to end the 180-year filibuster, and to question the constitutional cornerstone of 2 senators per state. Parents and students need to reconsider what kind of education is being provided by these universities. It costs so much and produces so little of real value. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Critical Race Theory, go to viewpoints.info/CRT.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and we're talking about things that happened during the week. And, of course, joining me at the round table, Lathan Watts of the First Liberty Institute, Genevieve Collins with Americans for Prosperity. And if you want to give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. If you have an issue about what happened this week, a lot of things are on the table. 1-800-351-1212. And we've got Allie from South Carolina, and let's go to Allie. Allie, you're on the air.
Hello, how y'all doing? It's good to be here and good to talk to you.
Thank you for joining us.
I was just wondering, y'all haven't gotten to it yet, and I don't know if you will, but I saw where Peter Ducey from Fox interviewed President Biden and mentioned the $450,000 payment to the illegals separated during the Trump administration. Mm-hmm. And then the assistant press secretary said that he was willing to do it. So I'm kind of confused.
Aren't we all?
As is the president.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of confusion going around.
Lathan, you've looked at this, I think, a little bit, and it's not quite $450,000 for everybody, but there's a lawsuit that's involved here.
Yeah, and he's right. Yeah, the press secretary had said that they would be willing to consider payments to these families who had been separated at the border, and I think they said up to potentially $450,000. But then Biden said, nobody talked to me about that. We're not going to do that.
Well, I think he called it garbage with Peter Ducey.
Yeah.
But this is a lawsuit brought by the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, and I believe because it's a lawsuit and they're looking at damages, and the issue was what kind of damages do you end up paying these people, and so it wasn't a sort of a blanket statement that if you got separated, we're going to give you some money, but is it a class action suit?
I think so. Yeah.
That these families brought, and but the issue is, if you do this initially, does that not sort of say to others who are thinking about coming, well, I'll bring a kid and we'll try to get them separated here, and then maybe we can be part of incentives matter out there.
It's a perverse incentive.
It's a perverse incentive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, this is not the direction. I mean, this is not the direction where our country needs to go. We're making huge sums of money and blanket sums of money to families separated. That happens every day, unfortunately, in this country, that families get separated due to a lot of different circumstances. And the federal government does not need to be in the middle of that.
Thank you, Allie, for bringing that up. We needed to touch on that. Now, Lathan, let's turn to the Supreme Court, because they heard a couple of important cases this week, one on abortion and one on gun rights. What was your take on the abortion case?
I don't think oral argument went that well for Texas, just based on the reports and the questions that were asked by the justices. Kavanaugh and Barrett and Roberts really seemed concerned about the enforcement mechanism in the Texas law that calls for civil enforcement for a private citizen to sue somebody who provided an abortion that was outlawed by the law. There seemed to be a lot of concern over that. I think it was Kavanaugh that brought it up, that if you can do this for abortion, could California do the same thing for guns? And it's
a fair question.
It
right?
is. It absolutely is. And so I don't think oral argument went well. Now, sometimes justices ask questions at oral argument specifically to draw out like the weakest points of the case, so that they can then go write an opinion that addresses those things while still upholding the laws. Just because they ask the question doesn't mean that they're necessarily leaning towards ruling against it. However, it did not seem to go well at oral argument.
But this was not the only bite at the abortion apple, if I can use that term.
Yeah, no, it's not. They've already agreed to hear Dobbs versus Jackson, which is out of Mississippi, this term. I think it's going to be argued in December, because we have a case that's going to be argued in December 8th, and I think ours is like right after theirs, after the Mississippi case. So, and that again is a state restriction, on abortion. It
15 weeks, I believe.
I think it's 15 weeks. And it truly is sort of keyed up to give the court an opportunity to address Roe v. Wade if they want to. And I think whether or not they address Roe v. Wade, the importance of these bills is that it's shifting, or they're potentially shifting the court's focus away from the viability of the fetus, which is sort of the Roe way of thinking about abortion, towards when does life begin? If there is a heartbeat, then that is a person. What else is it? If there's a beating heart, what else is it? If it's a person, then it has rights, equal protection under the 14th Amendment. So whether or not they use the Dobbs case to say, hey, look, Roe's been wrong since the day it was decided, and it's time to just say so, return this issue back to the states. Whether or not they do that, I think it's important that the court start to look at the issue from the standpoint of a life, not just could that baby survive outside the womb, but is that a person? And if there's a heartbeat, then if it's not a person, what else is it?
So, and you have a concern that because of the split of the court, the Chief Justice might end up siding with the majority of the conservatives if they want to make some changes. So he has the right. So explain that.
Right.
Explain that dynamic there.
Yeah, when the Chief Justice is in the majority, he gets to either write the opinion or assign who writes it. So if he doesn't write it himself, he can assign it to a member in the majority to write the majority opinion. If he's not in the majority, then that duty goes to the senior most justice in the majority. So if let's say, Roberts, Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett are all in favor of upholding the Mississippi law and declaring Roe v. Wade was wrong and overturning Roe v. Wade. And Roberts doesn't want to go that far. Then his choice is, if he votes with the 4 liberals and it's a 5-4 decision, then that would leave Justice Thomas as the most senior justice in the majority, and Justice Thomas could write that opinion. And I guarantee you that opinion would go much further than John Roberts wants to. So his other option is, I join the 5 and it's a 6-3 decision, but now I'm in the majority and I decide who writes the opinion, and he could write it himself. And then he could, potentially write a very convoluted opinion that somehow he can get the other 5 to go along with to uphold the Mississippi law, but avoid the Roe v. Wade question. Now, I think that's going to be a very, very difficult needle to thread, because you have to get 5 justices to agree on the majority opinion for it to be the majority opinion. And Thomas and Alito and I think Gorsuch are committed to the fact that Roe v. Wade was wrong when it was decided. And they don't really have qualms about overturning precedent if it was wrong. Now, Barrett and Kavanaugh seem to have more concerns about overturning precedent. So he somehow has to cobble together 5 justices on board with a majority opinion. He's going to be in a tough spot.
Now, he can write that opinion, but the others in the majority could do a concurring opinion where they try to express their greater concerns or something.
And I think if he wrote the opinion in a way somehow that upheld the Mississippi statute but didn't touch Roe v. Wade at all, I think you would see a flurry of concurrences. I think you would see Thomas write one that either Alito and Gorsuch joined, or they might all 3 write separately, because you can write, you can write concurrences for a number of reasons. You can write it that I agree with the outcome of the decision, but I also think we didn't address XYZ. You can write it to say, I agree with the outcome, but I don't like the legal reasoning we used to get there. I think we should have gone, this way. So if he did that, I think you would definitely see a concurrence from Thomas.
And just because we can't emphasize it enough before we get to the break, if the Supreme Court does overturn Roe v. Wade, then it doesn't mean
abortion's illegal.
Abortion's illegal. It goes to the states.
To the states.
And how does that work?
Well, then, the state laws on those on that issue would be the law in that state. Many states never repealed the laws against abortion, even after Roe v. Wade, so that if Roe v. Wade was overturned, that law would still be in place. Other states since then have passed what they call trigger bills that say if Roe v. Wade is ever overturned, then the law in this state shall be that abortion is outlawed, or abortion is outlawed unless, rape or incest, or, however they want to write those laws. So it would be up to the state legislatures.
Good. And so we return to a federalist system like we were in the beginning.
Right.
My guest is Lathan Watts from the First Liberty Institute, and Genevieve Collins she's the Texas Director of Americans for Prosperity. And we'll be taking more of your calls if you want to. 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. And we'll get to the gun rights decision next.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby today. And with me in studio, Lathan Watts of the First Liberty Institute and Genevieve Collins. She's the Texas Director of Americans for Prosperity. And Lathan, when we left, we were talking about the Supreme Court issues. And of course, we had the abortion case, the Texas abortion case. Right. But we also had a gun rights case that came up. And I think conservatives were happier with the way that went.
Yeah. It's a dangerous business trying to predict what the Supreme Court's going to do, read the tea leaves, based on oral argument. But oral argument in that case seemed to go much, much better. The conservative bloc on the court seemed very, very skeptical of the law in New York, which basically said, yeah, you have a Second Amendment right, but once you leave your house,
right, kind of,
then
but
it's
not
up
really.
to us. Yeah, right.
And this is in New York, right?
Yes, in New York.
And that's the most dangerous place, is leaving your house.
There in Chicago.
On one of your articles on the website, it said, there was on Reuters, it said Justice Samuel Alito wondered why only, quote, celebrities, state judges, and retired police officers should be able to carry concealed guns and not ordinary citizens. He goes on to say that people are illegally carrying guns on subways and streets in New York, but ordinary, hardworking, law-abiding people, they can't be armed. So I think it goes to your point, much better.
Yeah, oral argument seemed to go much better in that case than it did in the Texas case. So again, you have to kind of wait and see, how the opinions come out. They can always surprise us, but have you ever noticed that it's always the so-called conservative justices that surprise us? You're never surprised by the liberals.
I've written several articles. The only swing votes are conservatives because the liberals always vote in lockstep. Yep. And the conservatives sometimes surprise you, but the liberals never surprise you.
Because they're outcome driven.
Right.
They are not. They're not concerned about. They'll jump through any hoop. They will reinterpret any word in the Constitution they have to get the outcome that they want. That's why it's always easy to predict how the liberal bloc of the court will vote. You just decide, you look at the case and go, what's the liberal policy outcome that's desired here? That's how they will decide.
They do it all the time.
It is always the conservatives who tie themselves in knots, via textualism and originalism and everything else, trying to, craft the constitutionally appropriate opinion. And I think we've talked about this before, how we talk about it being a 6-3 court, but it's actually a 3-3-3 court. The three liberals who are completely predictable, outcome-based, policy-based, never going to be surprised by them. Then you have, within the six conservatives, you have Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch, who are textualists by nature when it comes to interpreting, and who also are not shy. They're not institutionalists about the court itself. They're not concerned with, quote, the reputation of the court. They're not concerned about stare decisis and all of these other things. And then you have Roberts, Barrett, and Kavanaugh who are conservative in interpreting the Constitution, but have sort of a thread that runs through their decisions of wanting to protect the court as an institution itself and not wanting to make big sweeping decisions and overturn, long overdue precedents. And so that's why we tend to get surprised, because you're constantly looking for what is going to be the five. How are you going to cobble together five of those six on an opinion that they all five come together on?
And in Genevieve, the inherent contradiction in the liberal approach on this strikes me as just stunning, because if we had a safe society, most people wouldn't necessarily want to carry a gun around. I mean, if I know I can go from point A to point B and I'm safe, nobody's going to attack me, nobody's going to steal my car, nobody's going to try to rob me, then I'm not that concerned about carrying a gun. But if crime is going up and I have a real threat of having my person attacked, robbed, assaulted, or other things, as crime is going up right now under Democratic policies, then I'm going to want to carry something that might help protect me. So you get this sort of contradiction of we want bail reform, we don't want police, we don't want to do that to these areas, especially in cities, and yet we see crime exploding, which gives me a greater impetus to try to carry a gun, which they don't want me doing.
Well, based on your logic, Chicago should be the safest city in America.
Should be the safest city.
Chicago, D.C.,
New York. I mean, based on the local laws, they should be the absolute most safe place in America. And I don't want to go to any of those places for my own personal safety. And I think that you're seeing voters, we saw in Minneapolis this Tuesday, they rejected the defund the police motion on the ballot. You're seeing woke communities, whether it's Seattle or Buffalo, New York or Minneapolis, say, wait a second. Okay, maybe I was with you on some of these policies last year in the wake of George Floyd and what happened with his murder, but this seems a little too far. And I really want the police, and I want to live in a safe community. I want to feel safe walking down the street. And if that means that it's now my responsibility to protect myself carrying a firearm, then I need that opportunity. That's my God-given right, and I should be able to have it.
And you see that in New York as they elected Eric Adams as the new mayor, I believe.
Yes.
And this is he's not de Blasio, let's say.
Praise
he's still a Democrat, but he's not de Blasio because he feels like we need to get these streets safer and others. And I would argue that de Blasio was doing things to make the streets less safe.
I would agree. I would agree. I mean, de Blasio is an actual socialist. So I think that his policies have, quite frankly, ruined many families in New York and have caused a mass exodus out of New York City. And now those folks up there, if the Build Back Biden agenda passes, they'll be taxed at the highest tax rate in the world. Almost 60% of their hard-earned dollars go to paying taxes. I mean, this is crazy. And I mean, I know that we started off talking about gun rights here, but I'll bring it back to that, is that if people want to be safe and protected in their own homes, this is their Second Amendment right. And this case in New York, and they've been trying to go after the NRA for a long time. They've campaigned on it.
Yes.
This is completely political and completely unconstitutional.
And the one going after them, Letitia James, that right? Who is the Attorney General?
That's correct.
Who is now, I think, running for? Didn't I see she's going to run for governor? I thought I saw.
I think that's correct.
I believe that's correct. So it's interesting. That might be maybe there was some politics behind that. But politics has gotten behind so many things. I would have thought 3, 4, 5 years ago that the Centers for Disease Control would have been a non-political entity. They tried to say it was politicized under Trump. I don't know if that's true. Maybe it was, but it has been so politicized under Joe Biden that you sort of you realize. In fact, the New York Times came out recently with some people from the FDA saying, yeah, we felt a little pressure trying to approve some of the vaccine approaches just because that's the Biden administration needs that to be able to say they're getting these things through and done.
Yeah. The Biden administration's been remarkably ineffective to the point where the press secretary just says, lower your expectations. She said that.
I lowered them on November the 2nd.
Yeah. I think this administration, as well as the Democrat Party in general, is just desperate for a win. And I think my personal opinion is that they want to win some social cause, and fighting against guns to them makes the most sense.
But it's going to hurt him at the polls.
It does, yeah. And just as you mentioned, the defund the police thing failed in deep blue Minnesota, and it's because they're being driven by the absolute furthest left wing of their party, who want to defund the police, who don't want you to be able to own a gun, but their most reliable block of voters in those urban areas, African Americans, who are statistically more likely to be victims of crime, are the ones who come out and voted against that. They want police in their neighborhoods. They understand that's what keeps them safe. And just like you said, Dr. Matthews, I was about to call you Kirby. If you're not going to,
I'm better looking.
If you're not going to fund the police, then by God, I'm going to defend myself.
Yeah.
And you can't have it both ways. You can't tell me we're not going to have police and I'm not allowed to carry a gun outside my home. And so yes, they're being driven by the furthest left wing of their party, and they are losing part of their base. And I think that's why they lost as big as they did in Virginia. I think if they keep doing it, you have the potential of a red wave midterm election. And the R's only have to get a +5 to take back the House. They don't have to get much to take back the Senate. And if you think Joe Biden's ineffective now, Wait until he's dealing with a Congress full of Republicans.
Yeah.
It'll be amazing. And I think there was also a good outcome in Portland, wasn't there? There was, I think, a change in Portland because of, and I can't remember what it was right now. Anyway, we were back for one final segment here in a few minutes. So if you want to find out more about some of these articles that we were talking about, go to pointofview.net. We have links to them, thanks to Karen. We've got links to a number of those, and we encourage you to go take a look at those. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about what was happening this week, and then we'll go through what Americans for Prosperity and First Liberty is up to. Stay with us. We'll be back.
Do you ever search online for a minor ailment, only to find so much information you begin to worry you've got a serious disease? The best thing to do in those cases is to check in with a real MD. The same wisdom applies to teens searching websites on gender identity. Crystal Cole, medical director of the Center for Gender Affirming Medicine at Akron, Ohio's Children's Hospital, told the Wall Street Journal gender-diverse people have always existed, but they didn't necessarily have a community or a way to find that community. She continued, "What we're seeing now is young people comfortable in exploring their gender identity and finding communities of people who will accept them and not judge them. That's one of the wonderful things about social media." It's not wonderful. The journal's family and tech writer, Julie Jargon, says the academic and medical communities are debating the role that social media has played in the apparent increase in teenage discussion and exploration of sexual identity. Abigail Schreier, author of Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, warns parents of the dangers of this online encouragement. She speaks of an endless supply of mentors who cheerfully document their own physical transitions, omitting mention of dangerous side effects, and offering tips on how to pass as a man and how to break away from unsupportive parents. In her article, How Gender Forums Online Can Pose Risks, Ms. Jargon tells the story of 17-year-old Noah, who prefers fashion and art to sports. He accessed a site called Discord. In a chat room for artists, members suggested he might be pansexual or gender fluid and gave him lots of positive encouragement when he began identifying that way. Childhood friends were puzzled at this development, and his parents encouraged him to take a break from Discord and found him a registered family therapist. Noah rejected those disordered identities. Without alert friends and parents, he may have taken a different path. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we're back with our final segment on Point of View today. And Genevieve, you and I were talking, and you mentioned that one of the big changes that happened in the election is school boards.
Yes, I think this is one of the most underreported stories of the week. Tuesday's election, obviously fireworks for the conservative movement in Virginia, as well as really in New Jersey. But across the country, there were school board races for a lot of school districts. Here in Texas. Just one example in Texas, in Houston, Cypress Fairbanks School District, there were 3 long-serving 20-year quote veterans school board folks that were ousted by parental rights advocates and candidates. And you're seeing that. I was looking across the country. In Florida, there were about 5 school districts that had their school boards overturned from, keep keep parents out to now parent advocate and parental rights candidates that are now elected. One thing I just saw, my favorite group to follow about school boards is Moms for Liberty. They're based out of Florida. They're all former women, former school board members in Brevard County. They started this organization to help give more school board members choice and a voice for parents. And in Pennsylvania, in Bucks County, this is a huge deal. There are 13 school districts in this one county. 8 of those school districts flipped to parent. I'm trying to get it right. So 8 of 13 school districts now have a majority of school board members that value parental rights.
Interesting.
And you're seeing that's going to be the untold story that we're going to see time over again throughout the next years. What I predict, you're going to see a lot more parents be a lot more involved.
And that will be a long lasting legacy because people start there. And we've, here on Point of View, we've encouraged people, if you want to, well, I'll put it like this. There's this statement, don't get mad, get even. And I would say, I'd change it, don't get mad, get elected.
Yes.
And we encourage people, if you're thinking about running for an office, the school board's a good place to start. The cost is a lot less. I mean, you need less money. You go by and you visit with people. Parents and people in the community care about that, so they want to talk to you about it. And it allows somebody to begin to sort of get their feet wet in the electoral process and how you go through, get elected, and begin to make a difference just at that level. And that could end up being the biggest sort of legacy from some of this if we've seen a lot of parents who are concerned getting involved in the school board.
The best thing that ever happened was COVID, and parents saw what their kids were learning, and now they're getting involved.
And Lathan, one more thing we wanted to touch base on was the issue of John Durham, special investigator. We talked a little bit about what's happening with the Clinton administration, the Steele dossier, and a bombshell thing that came out of just a few days ago is John Durham has indicted someone in the Steele dossier issue because of some of the problems that he's seeing there.
Yeah, I'll see your underreported school board story and raise you.
Speaking of underreported.
And raise you a completely underreported
non-reported.
Story. Yeah, non-reported. I was, just this morning, I think it was Fox News, flashed a graphic of the total number of minutes on air dedicated to this story by ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, and MSNBC. And the grand total of minutes on this story was 0. They have not talked about it at all. And just like you said, Dr. Matthews, I mean, there was an indictment finally. And the indictment, if you read it, it's pretty damning that the basis for all of this investigation, and the surveillance of the Trump campaign was completely manufactured by either folks attached to the Clinton campaign or hired by the Clinton campaign, that they knew it was manufactured when they gave it to the FBI. The FBI had their doubts about it and finally figured out that, it's probably made up, and they used it anyway, knowing that it was false, to go get FISA warrants and do surveillance and all sorts of other things. It's 10 times what Watergate was, and completely unreported. Now, it's almost too little too late at this point. I mean, Durham finally indicts somebody, 2 years into the next presidential cycle, but justice has to be done. Okay, and justice delayed is justice denied. I get that, but this cannot stand in American politics. When people are caught doing this, there need to be consequences for doing this.
Yeah.
And I pointed out yesterday on the air, when the article came out, I was looking at the New York Times article, and the New York Times reporter was highlighting that it was a Steele dossier, it was largely fabricated, the Clintons were involved in it, and he goes through and thinks, well, sure, you've got all the facts here, but you haven't you don't make, you mentioned underreported. I would argue that they just largely ignore it. I mentioned yesterday that Scott Simon, National Public Radio, doing his Saturday morning show, talking to Hillary Clinton, who's just with another lady, got a novel out, and he's just sort of fawning over Hillary Clinton, and then ask her about democracy and, the threat to democracy from the Trump administration and so forth, and Hillary's weighing in. And I thought, you didn't even ask her about the Steele dossier.
They don't care.
Just completely ignored it. So anyway, it's frustrating, but voters are beginning to notice and make a difference. Genevieve, tell us a little bit. You've talked a bit about Americans for Prosperity. What are y'all working on now? Where do you hope to go in the next few weeks?
Well, we're trying to make sure that I'd like to think that I'm a one-woman social spending net killing machine. Our organization has been focused on killing the infrastructure bills because we believe that it is egregious, wasteful spending. We've spent so much money this last year, that now's the time to actually be smart and be fiscally conservative and responsible.
How do listeners find out more about you?
AmericansForProsperity.org, or you can follow me on Twitter at GCollinsTX. I'm also on Instagram, Genevieve Collins TX. Please follow me. I am focused on building the most tactical grassroots army that the state of Texas has ever seen by the next presidential election. We're going to shut the Democrats out.
Now, since we've got listeners in all the states out there, if they are looking for, how do I find out if I'm in Virginia or I'm in Georgia or I'm in South Carolina or another state, who should they follow? Can they go to the website?
Absolutely. You can go to our website. You can find your state and we'll get connected to you. You can also sign a petition that says that you're against this infrastructure bill or this wasteful spending spree. We've sent over 2 million petitions to federal legislators from folks all over the country. So it's a really exciting time to be part of this huge policy activated grassroots army.
And Lathan, what's First for Liberty working on right now?
Well, you got another 3 hours. So we've got a case we'll argue at the Supreme Court in December, challenging Maine's tuition scholarship program that excluded religious schools. We have Coach Kennedy's case is up for consideration at the Supreme Court. We're just waiting for it to get on the conference list to see if they'll hear it again this time. We have another case out of Fredericksburg, Virginia, where the municipal court decided that they would interpret the Presbyterian Book of Church Order and decide that these two ministers living in a campus ministry house were not ministers, and therefore we're going to tax this property. That's up for consideration at the Supreme Court. We're representing the Navy SEALs on the vaccine mandate. We're representing 3 Christian ministries challenging the OSHA mandate.
And they can go to firstliberty.org.
Firstliberty.org. You can get all the information about all of our cases there.
Good. Thank you. And I want to thank Andrew for handling the engineering today and Steve as the producer. We've covered a lot of material. So Genevieve, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Lathan, thank you for being here again.
You're always good to be back.
One of the frequent ones here on Friday. We'll be back on Monday on Point of View. So I thank you for listening and joining us. You can always go to pointofview.net to find the show and look at it again. Thank you, and we'll be back Monday.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.